Hello, everybody. Lewis here from Status Coup. Today is Wednesday, June 7th. If you're on the East Coast and the Northeast watching, hope you are doing okay with all of the smoke in the air right now. We're going to get into a little bit of that a little bit later on. I'm originally from upstate New York in Rochester, and I got some photos sent from my mom this morning. She said she stepped outside and it smells like a bad campfire. So I know that that's an issue there. I saw some crazy images and videos from New York City that we're going to get into towards the end of this stream. But first, we're going to get into a whole bunch more information breaking from East Palestine, Ohio. I've spent the day going through the last 2 weeks of public health info sessions that have gone on. The latest one happened literally last night with some pretty breaking news in my opinion, but we're going to start first with the one that happened last week to set up this week's. The initial one happened with a member of the NIH present, as well as a University of Kentucky researcher. The EPA was present as well. Some information given, but also a lot of non-answers still coming for residents. A lot of we're going to continue looking into this. A lot of we're in the process of doing these tests, and unfortunately it's seeming like it all might just be a little bit too late to really find out what exactly, what specific chemicals are causing some of these things, what actually can be done at this point now that residents have unfortunately been exposed for 4 months. I can't believe we're still talking about this. I guess I can't believe it, but it's outrageous. And then kind of the biggest news in all of this, and you're definitely going to want to stick around for this, is last night's hearing with members of the CDC present, as well as other health agencies. The major piece of this that we're going to get into are some inconsistencies, maybe lies, dare I say, from the CDC regarding the CDC providing guidance to local doctors about whether or not folks should be getting vinyl chloride urine tests. Some major inconsistencies here because the member of the CDC who was speaking at that meeting last night says one thing, but we've got both video evidence and hard paper evidence that states exactly the opposite. So we're definitely going to get into all of that. But first, please press the like button to help get this out to more people. That is unfortunately the way the YouTube algorithm works. So if you can say hello in the comments, I try to keep an eye on them throughout. That will help get this out to more people. If you're not subscribed to us already as well, we've got a lot of good content coming out over the next couple days. Tonight, we actually have a new interview that Jordan did with a lawyer representing residents in Kalamazoo, who is actually suing the EPA, Governor of Michigan Gretchen Whitmer, as well as Graphic Packaging. That interview will be coming out later tonight, so if you're not subscribed, good spot to do it. Tomorrow, an interview that I did earlier today with Pennsylvania Representative Abigail Salisbury will be coming out as well. So if you're not subscribed already, please do so. Please press that like button. But without further ado, we will get into it. So as I kind of teed up, first we're going to have a little bit of information from last week's public health hearing. The video of that was just released. So we're going to get into specifically what folks at that hearing were talking about and kind of giving the lowdown on exactly the correct response that's being set up so far, or incorrect response, depending on how you look at it. Let's go ahead, Colin, and play the first clip from last week's public health info session.
As Mark noted, I've been with other agencies. I've worked with CDC, I've worked with EPA, I've worked with FDA. I've worked with agencies a lot, and a lot on the disaster issues and experiences. So with respect to the situation in East Palestine, we've been asked at NIH by your congressional delegations in both Pennsylvania and Ohio to see if NIH could contribute to help untangle some of the research needs and understand some of the public health issues and concerns more fully. With respect to that, we have specifically engaged with the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. So if folks aren't familiar with the National Academies, it's an independent organization that's been around since 1863, and they specifically aid the government by bringing in scientific expertise and subject matter experts to opine on policies and issues and situations in a neutral manner and to bring their expertise to give advice about situations and how to move forward. The National Academies, as a matter of fact, has been involved with a number of public health emergencies and has done what's called rapid workshops. They did it for the Gulf oil spill in 2010, and that was held in response to that. We've had them for Hurricane Sandy, the Ebola situation, the Zika situation. So a number of times the Academy has been called upon to bring together experts quickly and effectively to try to look at the situation. So we are currently working with the academies to pull and to have them develop a rapid workshop in response to the East Palestine train derailment.
So a couple things to unpack there. I see in the comments, Tony just asked, who is this guy? He's a representative of the NIH, the National Institute of Health. And again, this is at last week's hearing. We're going to get into this week's hearing in just a second here. But first, a couple things with that. They're talking about setting up a rapid response. Again, the last I checked, today is June 7th. This derailment happened on February 3rd. This seems anything but rapid to me. I understand there's bureaucracy and all of this stuff, but man, if this is considered rapid, the people in East Palestine are shit out of luck at this point. But besides the point, they were asked initially to come in. Again, this was asked by the congressional delegation. Representative Bill Johnson, who represents this portion of Ohio, I guess had reached out for this to happen. Again, I have no idea how long Bill Johnson waited to do this, if essentially we're in June and this is the first public hearing that has happened here. But let's go ahead and get into a little bit more details of the study that they're actually talking about doing at this point. The study sounds like the right idea, but again, it's just seeming like all of this is coming together a little bit too late. Colin, you can go ahead and play clip number 2.
It took I'm going to say a long time, but it wasn't until April that we launched an East Palestine train derailment health study. The initial step is a survey. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's meaningful. So if you're interested in participating, of course, we have flyers and it's an easy QR code. If you need a hard copy, we can get it to you. But as you heard from one of your federal representatives, we are in this for the long haul. I don't want to let you go until you know what the exposures may have been and what possible health outcomes you could be facing now and then even in the future. So this survey is the beginning point. And Aubrey represents the NIH, which is a funding institute. They have internal grants and do work, but they also provide research grants. So yes, I have a grant in. I hope it gets scored well and reviewed well. But part of it is to fund this survey and then take it further. Internally at the University of Kentucky, yes, Kentucky will give money to Help Ohio, which is great. So I have a pilot in I'm working on this is one of my goals is and in talking to some of the residents and you, what are the biomarkers of exposure? So I know some have gone to your physician and asked for biomarker testing. So, and I've been looking at that exact question. What would be the markers? Like, how could you know that if you had been exposed? And it's a great question. So I've been working with different colleagues across the U.S. and we're building methods even now, and we want to do a pilot. So one of the next steps following this survey is to invite just a small handful, maybe 20, to come and have urine and blood drawn. And that will be my goal now. We were trying for June, but I think it's going to get into July because we want to make sure we have this down. The protocol is pretty intense. There's several tubes of blood that need to be drawn, and we are going to be looking for potential biomarkers of exposure in this small subset. And that will tell us if we need to go bigger and do a larger broad scale study.
So again, we're looking into this. We're going to start to do this study. We're looking at maybe later this month, maybe into July. And again, this is great that there's finally some resources arriving, but I just fear that it's all too little too late. Most of these chemicals, from the initial explosion and whatnot, have not, like, they're some of them are present still as the cleanup is ongoing, but not at the levels that they were initially. To be able to track what these folks were exposed to in the earlier days would have been invaluable. The fact that we're talking now about, and some of the details, I don't have clips for all of this, some of the details that this researcher from the University of Kentucky talked about was having folks wear silicone wristbands to track what type of chemicals they were still being exposed to, because the chemicals will sit into the silicone and then they can take these wristbands and test them for some of this stuff. Again, all of that stuff would have been much more valuable done months ago, because at this point, some of those chemicals have either they're not there anymore because of their half-life, or they've morphed into all sorts of other different chemicals. These things are constantly ebbing and flowing, constantly changing. So the reality is it's kind of, you don't have a time machine. You can't go back and redo some of this stuff. And that's why, I mean, you've heard it from me. I've been critical of all of this regarding the testing for months, since back in February. Even if they waited 2 weeks and started this on, February 20th or something, the amount of information that they would have had would have been much more. And there were some studies going on back at that time, but as you'll hear as we get a little bit further into this, the number of people involved in them was not nearly enough, because the communication ability of these, three-letter agencies funded by the taxpayer is absolutely horrendous. It's horrendous, and it doesn't, it's the fact that it's gone this far and these people still don't have answers to these questions. It is just absolutely outrageous. We're starting way too late. Let's get into one more clip from last week's hearing, and then again, folks, please press the like button. What I'm about to get into after this one is the hearing that happened last night, where the CDC, we've caught in an outright lie, frankly. It's not an inconsistency. It's a lie. We've got a member of the CDC saying one thing, and then we've got somebody on video at a doctor's office saying exactly the other. We've also got on paper response that proves the CDC to be contradicting themselves massively here. But Colin, let's go ahead and play clip number 3, which is a question regarding testing in residence.
Dr. Haynes, one of the things that you mentioned is this group of, say, 20 that you're going to collect blood and urine from. Yep. I know my office has gotten calls about residents here that have been denied blood and urine tests by their insurance companies because the physicians and the insurance companies said, hey, this train derailment occurred February 3rd. Anything that you had in your system would have already worked its way through, and the blood and urine is not going to tell us anything about any symptoms that you're having right now. So what are you expecting to find, or what could you find in these biomarkers this long after the train derailment?
Love that question. I asked that myself. So one thing we are measuring, and we're going to look at different categories, different classifications of dioxin. I know dioxin has been a concern in the soil, and I'm like, we need to measure it in the human. Let's measure it in the body.
So does the dioxin stay?
Yep.
They stay in the system, so you'll be able to pick that up?
Yes. Now, There is a degradation over time, but it should still be there. Now, based on some of the EPA, the data that's been presented, I'm in the soil. I guess my hypothesis would be that the levels would be very low because the soil did not look radical. I wasn't really, I'm gonna say scared. I wasn't too heavily concerned when I saw the EPA soil data, but we're doing it anyway because I want to, check that box, cross that off, and say we didn't see it in those who we think might be most potentially exposed.
Okay. All right.
And then other chemicals. Do you want to hear about the other ones?
Sure.
So vinyl chloride definitely is would have been gone. However, there, some of the residents, maybe even in the room tonight, have received a test and said they found a vinyl chloride metabolite in their urine. So the question is where is it coming from? Is it from other sources? Is it from? So this will be just a more comprehensive way. We'll have it combined with survey data. And maybe there's exposures still occurring. Aren't they? They're still digging, removing soil. So I don't know. Let me just say, I don't know.
So that is Erin Haynes. She's a researcher with the University of Kentucky, and that's some more honesty than we've heard from a lot of other people. Again, even just admitting we don't know. Again, I've been saying for months, these agencies would have a whole lot more credibility with residents of East Palestine if from the beginning, when they were, asking, oh, is it safe to go back to my house? If they said, well, rather than saying, yes, it's safe, which is exactly what happened, yes, it's safe. It was just like a flat out answer. Yep, we waved our magic wand air, testers in your home and everything's all fine and dandy. I reported on last week that is not the case, that those detectors, I reported on it months ago actually, but it was re-reported on by others last week, that those detectors couldn't actually pick up a lot of the chemicals at the levels where they'd be a concern inside of people's homes. So if the EPA, if the CDC, if all of these other agencies actually were honest with residents of East Palestine months ago and said, you know what, we don't know, like Erin Haynes just said right there, there would be a whole lot more credibility. And then when you find the answers, give people the answers. Again, that's not how this whole crisis has been handled at all. But Erin makes a good point there, though, and she says at the end, I don't know if you caught that, maybe people are still being exposed. That is important because that is the only plausible reason why people at the numbers that they are still testing positive for the metabolite created by vinyl chloride exposure, this thiodiglycolic acid. That test, essentially, this thiodiglycolic acid is created when you have exposure to vinyl chloride. So that is a major issue that's still happening, and Erin Haynes, again from University of Kentucky, pointed that out right there, where a lot of other agencies are saying you're not being exposed to it anymore. The EPA is saying, oh, we're doing our air tests, and everything comes back fine. Then why are residents in East Palestine still getting sick? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense why they're still getting sick. Yeah, I mean, it's outrageous again that we're at this point, but we're going to move on now to last night's public health session that happened with the members of the CDC actually present in person. So this was put on in collaboration between EPA, CDC was there were some county health officials there were poison control officials there. The full hearing has yet to be posted by the EPA at this point, unfortunately. But fortunately for us, resident from East Palestine, Eric Kaza, who has been on the show a handful of times, some of you may be familiar with him already, did live stream the event last night on Facebook. With his permission, we were able to get some of these clips for you early, ahead of the EPA actually putting them up. So big thank you to Eric for allowing us to use some of this footage here. But at this meeting, again, some major bombshells and actually some real recognition so far from these agencies that people are getting sick. It sounds outrageous that that's like a big thing, but the CDC is essentially acknowledging the symptoms. The CDC talks about the symptoms that members of their own team had when they went to East Palestine to go try to do some of these surveys. So some really important stuff here. We got over 100 people watching right now live. Please press the like button to help get this out to more folks, because in just a couple minutes we're going to get to that specific line by the CDC. But first, Colin, we can start by playing clip number 1 from last night's public health session.
We wanted to share some of those early findings with you tonight. So in this survey, people told us that they had headaches, coughing, difficulty breathing, stuffy nose or sinus congestion, and burning nose or throat. We also saw similar symptoms in people that called the Poison Control Center, such as the one that Dr. Ian is representing tonight, or visited emergency departments in both Ohio and Pennsylvania. You may have also heard that some of our staff actually became ill when they went door to door during the ACE survey in the community. This did happen, so I want to acknowledge that. This happened when they were going door to door in the area closest to the accident. It is important to note that some staff conducting the ACE surveys door to door in the same area did not exhibit these same symptoms. So not everyone had symptoms that were in these areas conducting the survey. Our staff that did have symptoms had symptoms that are typical of those people who come in contact with chemicals released in this community. So similar symptoms of those impacted here by the train derailment. Some of our staff said that they experienced headaches, for example, while in the area, but the symptoms went away in a few hours. In the ACE survey, people also reported mental health symptoms, such as anxiety, tiredness, difficulty sleeping, nervousness, agitation, and feeling hopeless. People that took the ACE survey also mentioned that they were worried about long-term community impact and long-term health impacts. People were also worried about their property values going down.
So that was a captain from the ATSDR, which is a branch of the CDC. These are the folks who actually were in East Palestine a couple months back, who, when CNN put out the story talking specifically about members of the CDC who were getting sick when they were going door to door, essentially checking in with residents, doing this health study. They mentioned an ACE health study that's going on. That's what they're referring to. They essentially have been doing a survey of residents in East Palestine. I've got some issues with the survey. They didn't talk to nearly as many people. It was not nearly widely distributed for folks to even know that this was happening. We'll get into that in a little bit. But again, this is somebody from the CDC acknowledging these health effects. And in a bit, we're going to hear that they're acknowledging that it is related to some of this chemical exposure. Colin, I'm going to have you jump around a little bit. It's going to be clip 8 that I had you add last night, public health session with the CDC, clip 8. If you could play that, this is a short one.
That said, the physical and mental symptoms we saw are consistent with known health effects from environmental chemical accidents. We do expect symptoms to lessen over time. What we learned from the ACE survey can help the state and local health department.
So again, that's the same woman speaking from the CDC, saying that all of these symptoms are consistent with chemical exposure. This shouldn't be a big deal, but the CDC acknowledging these symptoms, acknowledging that these symptoms are consistent with that of chemical exposure. But we're going to start to get into some of the real good stuff here. Again, we got 115 or so people watching. Please press the like button to help get this out to more folks. We're going to get into a couple exchanges here, and when the full video comes out, we'll make sure that we post a link if you're interested in seeing this whole hearing. Again, it's not available on YouTube right now, but when we do get the whole thing posted, we'll make sure that if you're interested, you can see the whole thing. This next clip is going to be an East Palestine resident having an exchange with a member of the CDC. I believe this one is going to be with Arthur Chang, who is a medical, I want to have his title, he's a chief medical officer with the CDC over the vinyl chloride urine testing that we have heard so much about. There's going to be a couple clips regarding this. So Colin, go ahead and play clip number 2 from last night's public health session with the CDC.
So then how do we test for things for lower exposure for vinyl chloride? There are a couple tests that are out there, and a lot of these were developed very early on. And they're really developed for occupational use, okay? So people that work making PVC pipes for vinyl chloride, okay? What they can do is you can give urine, and then you can test for markers of vinyl chloride exposure through the urine. The problem with that is that you're not testing the vinyl chloride itself. You're actually testing for a marker of it. So vinyl chloride, after it gets absorbed into your body, your liver starts detoxifying as soon as it hits your blood. Okay? So as one of those metabolites your liver changes vinyl chloride into is what you can detect in the urine. The problem with that, though, is that vinyl chloride, like other VOCs, go through the same pathway through your liver. So those tests for, it's called thiol-diclycol acid, would not be very specific to vinyl chloride. It would actually pick up other exposures as well. Okay? And the reason why this test, even in occupational settings, is not used anymore is because there are a lot of false positives. Okay? So one of them is actually vitamins. There's studies done where people that take vitamin B12 and folate, which you can buy at GNC in the store, will increase your thiol-diclycol levels. Okay? Thiol-diclycol levels are actually found in children as well. A lot of children are unexposed. They are, TGG levels that are elevated as well.
Or 5 parts of vinyl chloride that were ignited might also expose us as well.
That's a possibility.
Yeah, it is a possibility. I totally, yeah, I acknowledge that. Right.
I think we're getting dismissed, and it's very upsetting. I understand there are other things, I apologize. I have been reading. I got the ATSDR document here, 293 pages. Health effects from vinyl chloride, pages 11 through 88.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the health effects of vinyl chloride.
Right.
And I understand that the testing may not be accurate because there are other things that come into play. I don't eat raw onions like apples. I do not take supplements. I do not smoke. I do not drink. Where's it coming from for me? And we'll talk about those things, but we won't talk about the elephant on the tracks. And it's upsetting. And I've been looking at the documentation from the EPA, from the ATSDR, CDC. I'm going off the resources that you guys are providing and researching those. And I've called the ATSDR, I've called the CDC, I have a case number. I've never gotten a call back. I've called the toxic hotline. I don't get answers. You guys are the specialists. You're who we're leaning on, and you're leaving us high and dry to have nothing to do but sit here and worry. You said it goes through the liver, and the liver, it changes in the liver.
Right.
It also changes the liver.
Right. I was trying to get to that.
So I'm sorry. It's just.
I understand it can be very frustrating.
It's
Of course.
None of you have to go home at night and sleep with this.
Right.
We do. But we do. And then we're talking singular chemical and singular exposure. That's right.
We'll have some time to talk about this.
All right.
I mean, we're almost done. So I get it.
And I'm sorry. I know you guys are here to help us, and obviously you didn't derail this train, and you didn't light these chemicals on fire. I get that. I get it, and I'm not mad at any of you. I'm just.
We're frustrated just as you are. We're trying to tell you what we know, like where we're coming from, what we know about our planet and everything else. I know you researched this much and you looked at all the resources, and the questions we got are very intelligent, and you want to know what the answer is. So are we. We're on the same page. I was just trying to explain to you that those values are all over the place. Even, yeah.
We've had a resident who went through chemo.
Right, that's right. Exactly.
And
That's
that could be
right.
as a result of treatment.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I completely
Yeah.
understand that there are outside factors.
Right.
I get that. So I'm done. I'm sorry.
Well, we can always ask more questions later. That's why we're here, right? So then I was going to say, though, that vinyl chloride in the environment degrades very rapidly in a few days. Okay, in the water, it'd be a little bit longer, but it'd be gone as well. Okay? So if this is vinyl chloride, then it's coming from somewhere, right? And the tests that are designed to test it and detect it at very, very low levels, even lower than what we can detect inside the blood and the urine, are not showing any elevated levels of concern. Okay? So then we have to explain where that vinyl chloride is coming from. That's all, that's all I want to say about that part, right?
So that was a bit of a long exchange there, but I wanted you to get an idea of what was going on in that room. There was that resident's name is Linda. She did a great job throughout the entire thing, really pushing back and asking tough questions to some of these folks who were up there. We also heard from other residents we've spoken with. I mentioned Eric Koza, who is, we only have this footage because of him from last night. He asked a lot of questions as well. So a couple major red flags that stick out there. Just like Mark Durno has done countless times. Mark Durno, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is an EPA official who generally kind of hosts and runs these sorts of weekly meetings. He has also kind of just told people, oh, these vinyl chloride metabolite tests, they're not good, but every test that the EPA does is essentially golden. All the EPA tests are, of course, they're the highest of standards, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, again, Status Coup reported back in March, when I did some digging into this, and Mark Durno admitted at a town hall, that the air testing devices used in residents' homes actually doesn't pick up everything. It doesn't pick up butyl acrylate until it's 5 times above the level of concern. It doesn't pick up phosgene, the World War I chemical weapon that was used. It doesn't pick it up at all. It only picks up formaldehyde if you have a special attachment, which makes it so you can only test for chemicals like formaldehyde and not the others. So it's outrageous that this gentleman is saying the tests that you should be doing to test for vinyl chloride, and what he's referring to here is doing air testing, doing soil testing, this sort of thing, which the EPA is doing air testing, but the EPA is saying this air testing is coming up with nothing.
I have that EPA clip if you want to play it real quick.
Yeah, let's go for it. Yeah.
Helped develop the modeling for what the air was going to do when the plan was just to burn one car, right? Because that was the original plan. That night, Sunday night, the plan was not to burn one car. On Monday,
actually, Colin, I don't think that's the air
Yeah,
quality
I realize
one.
that's the wrong one.
You're good. You're good. No worries. Thank you, though. The good idea. Thanks. Thank you for Colin behind the scenes. He puts up with all sorts of stuff. I was adding all sorts of clips in at the last minute here to get this ready for you all. But again, the EPA admitted that the air testing devices that they're using in the homes isn't working. What else also isn't working? Because frankly, most of the residents in East Palestine don't trust any of these agencies at this point because it has been blunder after blunder after blunder with all of this. So now they're supposed to, oh yes, our tests are fine still, but again, this vinyl chloride urine test that many doctors now are prescribing for folks, despite what we're about to get into in a second here, which is despite the CDC seemingly telling them not to, and now saying the opposite, saying, oh, we never told people not to do vinyl chloride urine tests, and we never told them not to. Let's continue to get into it here. Clip number 3, resident Linda is continuing speaking with this gentleman, Arthur Chang. Again, he is a chief medical officer for the CDC in the Department of Environmental Health Science, Health and Science. So Colin, we can go ahead and play clip number 3 from last night.
But there's protocol. We're being treated like there's not protocol. We don't know what to do. That is ridiculous. If we're going to be statistics, I want you guys to get the data right. If some of us are going to have, issues moving forward, health issues, or our children are, you need to get this right. So if this happens again, other people can be helped. That is imperative. And we are here saying, help us get the data. Take our blood, take our urine, take our DNA, take some samples, help us. And then, for how many months we got turned away at hospitals by our doctors. Oh, you have a sinus infection. No, it's chemical exposure. No, it's a sinus infection. Mercy Health, we won't even test you. We won't do anything. You have to leave.
The CDC set guidelines.
That's not accurate. I know that we did not set guidelines.
I have it on video where my health provider says that the CDC set guidelines.
That was not a message that the CDC put out.
That's what we're trying to say.
I totally understand. So let me address the question about.
Speaking of having it on video, and just in case you had a hard time hearing that, that is a resident Eric Koza speaking up there saying the CDC even gave guidance to not do these tests. The gentleman on stage there, Arthur Chang, says that's not true. We didn't give guidance. We didn't give guidance. Eric refers to some video evidence he has of it, and we have that. So Colin, if you don't mind playing that clip that we prepared just before the show.
You know, the whole mercy system, and you're right, it is everywhere. Mercy is everywhere. Why aren't we getting answers? I don't know. I can't answer that.
Here's
All they're
what I
saying
was
is
told
the
by
same
this
thing
lady.
as CDC.
Here's where the CDC also gave you guys that guideline not to do that.
So all they said was that the CDC doesn't recommend it, and that it now, from just speaking with our doctors that are here today, they said that, you know, it has to go through who your provider is. So whoever your provider is, we could.
So that's resident Eric Koza speaking with a nurse at a Mercy Health center somewhere near East Palestine. And they say right there, the CDC doesn't recommend it. The CDC is recommending to not do these tests. We have even more to go with this, though. It's not just one video clip. We reported a couple months back on this guidance from the CDC. We obtained some documents that came from a meeting that happened between Senator Sherrod Brown and several residents of East Palestine. In that meeting, there was documents prepared for Senator Brown by his staff that included the details of the guidance in a list of all sorts of issues that residents were having, so that Senator Brown was prepared for the meeting. Colin, we can go ahead and pull up, it's the screenshot clip 4 from last night's public health hearing, and I'll go ahead and read that. So this is actually from the document provided by Senator Sherrod Brown's staff for him about this testing. So residents have been attempting to access blood and urine testing from healthcare providers, but have been denied lab services or even a doctor's order for the tests due to regional poison control center clinical guidance handed down to providers from CDC, ATSDR. So CDC, again, this gentleman on stage is from the CDC. The woman who spoke before him is from the branch of the CDC, which is the ATSDR. Colin, you can pull it back up, actually, and I'm going to continue reading. So the guidance of this states that blood and urine testing for specific compounds may not be clinically useful because there's a lack of accuracy, long turnaround times, difficulty with interpretation, lack of information about baseline levels in the general population, inability to rule out exposure or guide clinical management. The guidance states it is reasonable to order tests to evaluate the organ effects such as liver function tests, kidney function tests, and complete blood counts. So again, that seems like the guidance is that we don't think you should do these tests because they don't work. They don't work. All the other tests that we're doing that all sorts of have issues, they work, but you know, this issue, nah, those don't work. So again, you've got to kind of put all this together. You've got a member of the CDC, when asked about the CDC providing guidelines to doctors, saying, no, we didn't provide any guidance. That's what he said. We didn't provide any guidance. Well, what was the nurse that Eric was speaking to talking about? What is this referring to from Senator Sherrod Brown's office? Does the senator have getting bad information? Where is that coming from? It's a major, major red flag with all of this. And I'll say, it gets worse. We look further into this meeting, and it seems like at this point, they're just going to wait for residents to get cancer. I know that sounds outrageous that that's like what we're down to. But when you hear this next clip, it's frustrating. Colin, go ahead and play clip number 5.
The problem is that for us to fix exposure, we have to go back in time, and we can't do that.
Oh yeah, no, it can't.
It's not possible.
Put that toothpaste back in the tube.
Right, exactly. Not possible. Okay, so then what do we do? Okay, what we can do then is first, if you're going to develop any sort of the really scary health effects in the future, cancer, for example, angiosarcoma of the liver, that's a cancer providing chloride, we want to detect that early. So that's the reason why we're saying go to your doctor so that you can get examined and get the proper test. We know how to treat agent sarcoma. We may not know how to get rid of vinyl chloride from the body, but we know how to treat those cancers, okay?
We don't know how to get rid of vinyl chloride from your body, but we might know how to treat those cancers. Or we know how to treat those cancers. I mean, what? I mean, it's sad because it is unfortunately true. When you set a bunch of carcinogens on fire, which there were more than one on the train, and when those carcinogens, when they're combusted, they create others, it's gonna lead to something. And the unfortunate reality is, when you tell a town of 4,500 people that it's okay to go home 3 days after this explosion, that is what is going to happen. Cancer. That's what's going to happen. That is the answer that's being provided to people right now. We can treat the cancer later. But they're still being told it's okay to be there. Oh, we can't find it in the air. We can't find the vinyl chloride in the air. What? Okay, then what is it? All of these tests and these studies and this research that they're talking about doing now, okay, it's great, but where was it in February? Where was it? Instead, we left this town of people. I say we because I'm ashamed, honestly. Like, the United States let this town full of people who just went to bed on a regular Friday night. We're just going to let them suffer. They don't deserve this at all. And in many cases, they're being treated like criminals, essentially, for trying to get help here. They're being treated like conspiracy theorists for digging into this and trying to ask the right questions. And they are asking the right questions. And when you ask the right questions, you get an answer like that, which is, we don't know how to test for it, but like, we can treat your cancer later. Wow. I don't know what to say anymore about it. I don't. There's even more with this in regards to more evidence of more folks, unfortunately, being told that the CDC told their doctors not to do anything about this, or that their doctors received CDC guidance. I'm going to skip around a little bit, Colin. Let's go ahead and play clip 7 from last night. It's another account of doctors being told not to see residents because of guidance from the CDC that this gentleman is saying doesn't exist.
Okay, of the 702 ACE surveys that you received, how many of those were completed in Pennsylvania?
I believe it's 174.
Do you know how many people live in Darlington and Darlington Township?
I do not have that number.
Well, let me help you with that. There are over 2,000 people residing in that small area, and you had 100 people respond. Okay. There are over 4,000 people in East Palestine, so out of 7,000 people, you had 1% of the population respond to your test. And let me tell you why you only had 1%. Because somebody at the CDC had the bright idea to put out a webinar to tell our doctors not to see us at the end of February. Now, I don't know who the brilliant person was behind that, but I talked to my doctor on March 1st, and he told me, I can't see you, you have to go to the clinic.
I have it recorded.
I'd already heard the stories about the clinic. Okay. Now, I'm going to tell you that my daughter has been throwing up since February 3rd. And if I hear one more person tell me, well, that's not possible, you're 3 miles out, I'm going to scream.
Ken, you can sense the frustration in the room there. That's a different resident speaking than the one before. Again, this is outrageous. Again, you clearly hear the frustration. If one more person tells me, that I'm not being exposed, I'm going to scream. When you have children 3 miles away vomiting regularly for months since this happened, anytime the wind's blowing in their direction, I'm sorry, but what are we doing? What are we doing? And this resident also brings up a very good point about the health study that I want to hit on here. But before I get into this too, actually, I want to mention a couple things. Number one, appreciate the super chats that have been coming in. I've seen a couple. I will read through all those at the end. So if you want a comment for me to definitely read, a super chat is the way to do so. Also, becoming a member is the only way that we're able to continue to stay on this story. I've been on the ground in East Palestine 3 times at this point for about 3 weeks in total. I'm looking to get back again potentially some point in July. If you're able to support this kind of reporting, statuscoup.com/join is the way to do it. If I had not been on the ground with residents and speaking with residents still on a weekly basis with many of them, I talked to a couple today on the phone and via text, we would not be able to bring this reporting to you. This would be next week probably it happening, but because I have been able to speak with residents like Eric, who provided us with this video because we couldn't be there on the ground this time, it's the only way we're able to do it. I did see that we had somebody actually gift 5 Status Coup memberships. So big thank you to Joanne Keene, who gifted 5 Status Coup memberships today on YouTube. So keep an eye out on your YouTube notifications. You maybe have been gifted a membership. If you are able to support us, it's literally $5 to $10 a month. To do it, you can choose $5 to $10 a month to support us getting back on the ground in some of these places. You've heard from me a lot on East Palestine, but Jordan has been doing incredible reporting, obviously, in Flint, as well as in Kalamazoo, which, again, earlier I kind of teased an interview Jordan just did today with a lawyer who's representing residents in Kalamazoo, suing the EPA, the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, as well as Graphic Packaging affecting things there. So the only way we continue to do this sort of stuff is because of people like you watching who can help give us $5 a day. We don't rely on corporate bullshit sponsors. We are fully people powered, and that enables us to actually go on and speak the truth about a lot of these things that unfortunately your mainstream media outlets choose not to do for whatever reason that may be. With this though, so we heard this resident speak about the study that was going on, and she was, essentially saying that only 1% ish of residents between the East Palestine and Darlington side of this mess have been introduced or had been even asked about the study. CNN actually had a decent article about this that came out yesterday, the day before, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, Colin. I'm actually going to read the second section of it that I put up in the live doc. This is a CNN article that came out yesterday, and this section specifically talks about the kind of flaws in this testing and how poor of a job they did as far as actually reaching out to residents where they are. So I'm going to go ahead and read from this. Even as the study broke ground by using new methods to find and interview people believed to be most exposed to the chemicals, it had its limits. Some people who say they became extremely ill or who fear continuing chemical exposure after the derailment haven't returned to their homes. There's no official count of residents in East Palestine who continue to be displaced. To learn more about their circumstances, CNN posted a question in a local Facebook group asking for more information. More than 30 residents have responded that they are still not back in their homes 4 months after the derailment. Jamie Ray Wallace has spent the past 2 months moving from hotel to hotel with her husband, mother-in-law, and 3-year-old. Her home in East Palestine is near Sulphur Run, a creek that was heavily contaminated by the spill. The water from the creek sometimes floods the basement of her house when it rains. She says that immediately after the derailment, she and her 3-year-old were coughing with runny noses and burning eyes. Wallace says toxicologists hired by Norfolk Southern told the family that they should leave and that the railroad would pay for it. She says that now they're at another temporary rental in Columbiana. When she comes into East Palestine, particularly since the beginning, to work to remove contaminated soil under the tracks, she gets nauseated. Wallace became concerned that no one seemed to be collecting health information on the symptoms residents were experiencing after the spill. So she started her own online survey so she would have data to share with lawmakers and government officials. She didn't realize that ATSDR was already doing essentially the same thing. Wallace said she completed a mental health survey for the Columbiana County Health Department, but she never filled out the ATSDR survey because she didn't know about it. All of the moving around made it tough to keep up with the developments related to the derailment. So in that article, it continues a little bit further as well, and Jamie talks about this, and this is the same Jamie that you've very likely seen on the show before. If Jamie didn't know that this was happening, and other residents who are friends with Jamie didn't know this was happening, I'm sorry, but they didn't even try to get this information out there. Jamie and many of the other residents on the Unity Council in East Palestine have been freaking scraping every single website, every piece of information possible about what they can do to get their information out there, to have a health screening done. What were they like? They didn't even like put up a flyer in town somewhere. It was essentially done in a way that you had to have gone to the clinic in East Palestine to be counted on this survey initially, basically, from what I can understand and what I can gather. The issue with that is everybody from the very beginning knew that the clinic was essentially bullshit. I stood out in front of the clinic back in February, and I had people giving me all sorts of stares when I stood there for half an hour and told everybody how much of a joke that clinic was. For those of you who don't remember, the clinic was a place to go to essentially go talk to somebody to get some information. That's valid. That's okay. It was a place where you could get referrals to another doctor. Okay. But notably, they weren't doing any tests of any kind, blood or urine included. They weren't doing any sorts of diagnosis of any kind. They weren't providing any actual treatment of any kind, prescriptions, anything like that. What is the point? So residents saw that. They're like, why am I going to go to this clinic when they can't actually do anything for me? At best, they're going to provide you a referral to go see a real doctor. So when you wonder why, less than 1% of the people impacted are involved in this survey, you have to wonder, were they even trying to get it out there? Like, I'm just a regular guy, and I could have done a better job of getting it out there. You literally go to the assistance center. Go sit in McDonald's in East Palestine. You'd hit more than 750 people or whatever they had in there. It's not that hard. And not to mention, a lot of it was, fill out this online form. There's a lot of elderly folks in East Palestine who are not going to go fill out an online form. They're not going to scan a QR code. You've got to meet people where they are. And in this case, meeting people where they were wasn't going door to door, which is what they talk about doing in this. People were evacuated on purpose. Go to a hotel. I talked to a resident on the phone earlier today. If they just went and sat at the Best Western in Columbiana, right down the road from East Palestine, there's maybe 100 residents of East Palestine staying there at any given time, or any other hotel near there. A major, I don't know if it's a lack of effort or what, but again, these studies, they are too little too late at this point, in my opinion. But if you're going to do it, do it right. Do it right. It's not that difficult. It's just not. I want to play one last clip from last night's public health session. This one is directly correlated to another person who was speaking there. So we've seen quite a bit there from the member of the CDC who I played there, Arthur Chang. However, this is somebody from the poison control in the area. A lot of residents, essentially, to set this up, we're getting the runaround of who do I talk to? Who do I talk to for this or that? I go to the EPA office. They tell me they don't have an answer, but they tell me to call poison control. They call poison control. They say they don't have an answer. Go to your doctor. Your doctor tells you to call the CDC. You get the runaround, essentially. This is a kind of some complaints that came out against poison control at this meeting. Colin, we can go ahead and play clip number 6 from last night.
And I've done that. And what they did to me was read me the chemical data sheet, and you may be experiencing this. And that's what they were offering me. So I'm not really sure. They told me that they couldn't give any medical advice.
Mm-hmm. So again, as you may understand, it's not easy for us to say diagnose anything over the phone without a physical exam.
Well, I can look at Google and get that. I feel like if you ingest a poison in Columbiana County, you're going to drop dead before anybody gives you any help, or you're going to have to call 1618-66877-888-800 numbers, and then they're going to. What this can do is cause respiratory distress when you are in exposure limit. Come on. That's what I got. Did anybody else call poison control? Am I alone?
Yeah.
Jake,
Absolutely.
And what was your result?
Actually, my result was to call the CDC.
And
then I called the
CDC. You
CDC.
called the CDC.
I got hung up on.
I was told, we'll take your case number, but you have to realize that we put evaluation of importance on this, and this may not reach an importance level of a return phone call, and I never got one. So thank you, CDC, thank you, Poison Control, and thank you all, because this is what the residents are dealing with.
Yeah.
You have a narrative, and you've got But when you're on our side and you're panicking and you're worried about your family and your children and your friends and your community and your animals, and you are sick and your husband's sick and your daughter's sick and your animals are vomiting and you're calling and you're getting another number and nothing but BS and canned answers, this is not what we deserve. This is not what we deserve.
Yes.
It is not.
I don't, well.
Again, the residents can say it better than anybody. That's been a big issue in all of this. Listen to the residents. Listen to them. If you listened to them, if these agencies were listening to the residents, if the media organizations were listening to the residents throughout this whole thing, this could have gone a different way. Even listening to some of the experts who are like on the fringe of this. Dr. Welton has done a fantastic job. We've posted a lot of his tweets on here. He's done a fantastic job communicating the issues that are happening as they're happening and trying to give the EPA little off-ramps of, hey, I'm offering to help with this. Like, here, you've got time to course correct. And other folks as well. It's not just Dr. Welton, but there are experts speaking out on this, and the EPA and some of these other agencies just seemingly don't want to listen. I can't comprehend. I understand there's bureaucracy. The government is slow and it's an issue, right? But we're talking people's lives. Again, earlier in this CDC person just straight out said, he's like, oh, we don't know what tests to do anymore, but we know we can treat your cancer. It's outrageous that it has come to this at this point in time. And to make matters even worse, unfortunately, there's some lawsuits and whatnot going on with all of this. As you know, we haven't done a ton of reporting on it because a lot of the lawsuits want to keep their cards close. They don't want Norfolk Southern to find out exactly what it is they're going to try to attack them on. So people in connection with these lawsuits generally are not speaking out to the media in a lot of cases. So there hasn't been a lot to necessarily report on this. But there was a story that just came out earlier this week. And I appreciate some of the super chats that are coming in. I will read them all at the end. So if you have a super chat you want to leave, like Tony just did, thank you, Tony. I will read them at the end. But to get back to this, there is an article that just came out from Reuters. Colin, we can go ahead and pull that up on the screen. And I'm going to read a bit from it here. That essentially, I'll read right from it. Norfolk Southern says East Palestine residents' suit is barred by U.S. law. Norfolk Southern has asked a U.S. judge to toss a proposed class action lawsuit it is facing over a February train derailment that led to a toxic chemical spill in East Palestine, Ohio, arguing the claims are, quote, threadbare and barred by federal law. The railroad company told a federal court in Youngstown, Ohio, that the consolidated complaint filed last month on behalf of roughly 500,000 area residents, businesses, and property owners relies on, quote, vague and conclusionary allegations that it acted improperly, leading to the crash. The company said that it is required as a common carrier under the U.S. to transport hazardous materials like those that spilled and caught fire, including vinyl chloride. It says that the plaintiff's negligence and nuisance and strict liability claims are preempted by federal laws like the Hazardous Materials Transportation Act and the Federal Railroad Safety Act. Those laws expansively regulate railroad operations and bar those sorts of claims based on state law, Norfolk Southern said. Jane Conroy, an attorney representing the plaintiffs with the law firm Simmons Hanley Conroy, on Monday called the motion to dismiss routine and, quote, we have every expectation that the motion will be denied in its entirety. There's more to the article. Colin, maybe you can put it in the chat for folks if they are interested in reading the whole thing. It's not much longer than that, but Norfolk Southern trying to say, we were just carrying the chemicals. It was a total accident. We did absolutely nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. We didn't do anything wrong. Well, we know at this point that that's obviously not the case. Even if you were to have listened to or looked at some of the information with this wheel essentially being on fire or melting or shooting flames and sparks up into the air as far as like 40 miles to the west of East Palestine before setting off multiple wayside detectors and them choosing not to stop before. There's nothing wrong with that. And sure, maybe it's not breaking a regulation. I'll be very curious to see. I believe at the end of this month, we're going to have more from the NTSB on their investigation. We only have the preliminary. But Norfolk Southern is trying to say, oh, we did absolutely nothing wrong. Not a single thing wrong. Nothing. We're a common carrier. We're just carrying the chemicals like we're supposed to because we're a common carrier. Ridiculous. But this is going to be the game that we start to see play. I'm not a legal expert. I'm not going to pretend that I'm a legal expert in all of this. But my hunch is, in talking with a lot of these folks, is that this game from Norfolk Southern is going to be, let's drag this thing out as long as possible. And unfortunately, they might succeed in doing so. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. But Norfolk Southern is going to do their best to make this a long, difficult road ahead for these lawsuits. They've got the money to do it. So that's the game that, unfortunately, we are very, very likely going to see be played throughout this. And, you know, all of this ties into a little bit of what is going on the whole East Coast right now. If we want to change gears just a little bit, obviously, if you're in the Northeast, if you're in New York City, if you're even in upstate New York, like some of my family, you've seen some of the images of just the utter clouds of smoke that are coming down from these Canadian wildfires. A couple of them on the screen right here. I mean, that's the World Trade Center in New York City today. That is absurd. That is what is going on there. Obviously, terrible air quality across parts of the East Coast. That's a comparison from days before. That's in upstate New York and Rochester. That one. But imagine needing to essentially have air quality issues like this that don't go away necessarily. And these ones are natural, right? So these ones are as natural as they can be, right? This is from wildfires. This is smoke. It's harmful, yes. It's not anywhere close to as harmful as what's going on with in East Palestine. But the reason I get so worked up about some of this is that in East Palestine, it's not like they're dealing with their contamination problem. I'm not saying it's thick smoke like this. They're not dealing with it for a couple days like folks in New York are and folks in other parts of the country that are being exposed to this are. They're being exposed to it for seemingly months at this point, and they're having effects from it today still. Okay? So this is just a little bit of a taste for folks in New York City of what it's like to be exposed to something like this. Again, the comparison's not even close to as harmful as to what folks in East Palestine are dealing with. What happened in East Palestine is also very much man-made, but you've got to be very, very concerned about this sort of thing because it can happen to you, and you're getting a small taste of it right now. And I mean, the other thing you need to look at is this isn't normal. The amount of fires that are happening right now in Canada, this is significantly above normal for what is happening in that region. And unfortunately, as we've been seeing in California and in other parts of the country for the last couple of years, these things seem to be getting worse. Some real action needs to be, real steps need to be taken to start taking some of these climate threats much, much, much more seriously than they have been over my lifetime. I don't think anyone's really taking a lot of it seriously. But it's interesting, hopefully these wildfires do get under control. It doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon right now. But this is just a glimpse of what is happening for folks, when you have a disaster going on in your town like in East Palestine. It's not the same thing, but imagine that being your everyday for weeks and weeks and weeks and months. So it's a big issue. One last little piece that I'm going to just tease a little bit of, and the full video is on the YouTube channel Status Coup here. Our Tina Desiree Berg just has been doing some reporting in California where she lives. Colin, we can go ahead and pull up this tweet here. There was a big protest that was going on. I believe this was yesterday. I'm going to go ahead and just read this, and we'll play the little bit of a teaser here. But Tina will be hosting with Ron tomorrow, I believe. Colin, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But so I'm sure we'll hear more about it from her tomorrow. But you can see the full video of this protest that went on the Status Quo YouTube channel here. But I'll read this. A brawl broke out in Glendale, California, as anti-LGBTQ plus demonstrators attacked LGBTQ plus advocates outside of a school board meeting where board members were considering acknowledging June as Pride Month. Anti-LGBTQ protesters swarmed around our reporter, Tina Desiree Berg. Tina is no stranger to covering these sorts of stories. She is, frankly, an absolute badass when it comes to it, if I'm going to be honest. Colin, you can go ahead and play this clip here.
Sad state of affairs.
Spicy.
Welcome to America! Welcome to America!
You don't walk back, I'm gonna grab you. Whatever. Sorry. Walk back. Walk back.
All right, Colin, that should be good for now. Yeah, I mean, gives you a taste of the absolute chaos going on there. Obviously, we're seeing all sorts of protests regarding some of these ridiculous state laws going on across the country, breaking out. That one seeming extra chaotic. Again, that full video is posted on Status Coup's YouTube right now. If you're not subscribed to us already, good reason to do so, so that you see more of Tina's reporting like that. And again, she'll be on tomorrow evening's live stream with Ron Placone, I believe. So that'll be tomorrow evening, 5 p.m. Eastern. And you can get the full lowdown on everything that went on there directly from Tina, who was on the ground there because of Status Coup members who make it possible, like I said earlier, to be on the ground in these places. Tina has done a lot of great coverage in California, but she also went with Colin out to Atlanta to cover the protests surrounding Cop City going on there. And again, all of that funding all of those, that reporting is only possible, reporting in Atlanta, reporting that I've done in East Palestine, Jordan and Flint in Kalamazoo, my reporting in Jackson, Mississippi last summer even. Election coverage from time to time. We are getting into that season again, whether you like it or not, unfortunately, is because of Status Coup members. Again, we've gotten 5 paid memberships during this live stream today. If you want to sign up last minute here, please do so. StatusCoup.com/join is the way to do it. You'll get a shout out in the show here. Again, thanks to Joanne Keene for gifting 5, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 Status Coup memberships during this stream. Without that, I am going to start to wrap this up. We're going to get into a couple of the super chats that came on today. And I also want to shout out, I see a lot of positive comments about Tina. Tina, like I said, is an absolute badass going into all these situations. She knows all the people involved with this sort of stuff and does a really good job reporting on all of it. So definitely good on everybody for calling out Tina for the badass that she is. With that, we've got some super chats here. Liz Potter, $50. Thank you so much. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Thank you, Liz, $50 for that super chat. We also have Aggravated Progressive, $5 super sticker. Thank you so much, Aggravated Progressive. Always in the chat. Appreciate that. Appreciate the super chat as well. We've also got Das Bausch Fleisch, €5.99. Is it still an open question if there might have been undisclosed substances on this terror train? I like the phrase terror train. Maybe I'll borrow that. It is still an open question. I mean, it's there hasn't been any actual answers on this, but they very well could be. It's definitely something that we're still looking into. There very likely could be discrepancies with the manifests. It wouldn't surprise me at all. We looked into a lot of discrepancies on the manifest, got a lot of shady answers or shady non-answers. I can't tell you, yes, there was something different on the train, but I'm also not going to tell you no, because nothing surprises me in covering this freaking god-awful situation of a story. So, Das Bush Fleisch, thank you very much for the €5.99. Tony Dallas, $5. Thank you, Tony. The CDC is clearly responding to political pressure. They don't want to be forced into punishing the culprits, so they sow doubt and confusion. Sick. I agree, Tony. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I am happy in one regard that the CDC, the first kind of person that I played from the CDC today, acknowledged some of the symptoms for the first time. That shouldn't be like a celebratory thing to be, oh, it was acknowledged. These issues were acknowledged. But they, to date, really haven't acknowledged the symptoms coming directly from the derailment. They said that all of these symptoms are consistent with, chemicals in the environment such as this. So I think that that's a little bit of a win. But it was more gaslighting when it came to, talking about these vinyl chloride urine testing. It was lies when it came to guidance being provided by the CDC. And I just really couldn't get over the clip where the guy from the CDC literally just says, I don't know, we know how to treat cancer, just full on admitting like, yep, that's more than likely what's going to happen here is cancer, because we being these three-letter agencies, the EPA in this case, told people early on, absolutely safe to return home, when clearly it wasn't. So I don't even know anymore. It's a frustrating story to cover, but it's an important story to cover. It's probably the most important story in the U.S. For as far as environmental reporting goes. I mean, this is freaking huge. There is a lot still to uncover, but you've got my word that we're going to continue digging into it. And again, for those of you who are still here, tonight we're going to be posting an interview that Jordan did with a lawyer in Kalamazoo who is representing Kalamazoo residents, who is actually suing the EPA, Governor Whitmer, as well as Graphic Packaging. So if you're not subscribed, please press the subscribe button down below if you want to see that interview, as well as an interview that should be posted tomorrow that I did with Representative Abigail Salisbury, who represents District 34, I believe, in Pennsylvania. That interview should be posted tomorrow. Good conversation with her regarding railroad legislation progress in the state of Pennsylvania. You can also give me a follow on Twitter at LewisD217. But with all of that, thank you all so much for sticking with me tonight on this Wednesday evening. Enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll see you soon.